really intrigued, like on the risk here, right? Like the, I get the traditional like security risk assessment, but how do you analyze like the output risk, if you will, right? Like you've got all the normal things to do, but I mean, this is AI is almost like a creative. It's non-deterministic. Like, how do you figure out like is the outcome and the outputs of the system useful? Does the
Mm-hmm.
value add exceed the risk value? And how does that fit into the risk framework you're talking about?
Right. Well, and to piggyback there, and who's
Yeah,
assessing
exactly.
this, right? I mean, that's the other part, John. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm excited for this answer, Ed.
Yeah, it's a hard answer because mostly, in one hand, it starts off with really understanding the use case, right, and understanding the outputs in a way that enable you to validate, verify efficacy, right? It's no different than, I'll give you an example. Uh, if you're leveraging AI in a way to generate content, let's just say, okay, and your brand, and the reputation and the risk of brand reputation is important to you. Well, you better not send out that content without reviewing it,
Right,
right? So,
right.
so there's a guardrail that has to still, and this is why I think you see this adoption sort of spiking and then sort of slowly, you know, cresting and now
Yes.
sort of coming into this realization that, wow, we can adopt quickly, but we better make sure that maybe we take a pilot approach to this. So we really understand the risks, not just the cyber risk, but the data risk. So, understanding in that example, the content, great, you can generate all this content, but if you send out something that's offensive, whether in the written word or images or whatever,
Right.
you run the risk of reputational damage. You run the risk of, right? So it's a very similar approach. Like you can generate diagnoses, you can generate care, but if someone's not looking at that with an eye to efficacy, quality, right, that
Hmm.
you run the risk of doing the wrong thing. So, I think probably one of the largest use cases right now and most adopted use cases in healthcare is ambient listening.
Hmm.
And so ambient listening, for those of you not aware of it, is in a typical um, uh, session with a doctor, right? There's a conversation between the doctor and patient, and the doctor is interacting with technologies in some way. Sometimes the doctor has their head in the screen, sometimes they're using an iPad, right? But they're capturing notes, they're capturing
Hmm.
that interaction electronically so they can go back and review those notes and maybe create a care plan or whatever, right? Ambient listening removes that distraction.
Hmm.
So now the doctor, the caregiver, the clinician can have a face to face conversation like we're having
Hmm.
and not look at the keyboard and not look at the screen, right?
Hmm.
Because the ambient listening is pulling in the conversation details and then creating summary notes. Now the doctor is still responsible for those notes. They're his or her notes.
Yes.
So they
Yes.
have to review them and they have to make sure they're accurate. So that step, that last mile of review and validation and verification is so important. Now, will we come to a point where there's a governance agent
Hmm.
governing the other agents, right? Because this is all going agenic, right?
Right.
And what level of autonomy will we give these agents?
Right.
Full autonomy or maybe partial autonomy? I think we're going to have humans involved with AI for the next 5 years or so
Yeah.
until we work through the kinks. Some industries will probably adopt it sooner, warehouse
Right.
applications and things where the risk is low, and then some like healthcare will adopt it, a lot slower and a lot more deliberate and practical. Does that help, John? I know it's a great
It,
question you asked.
it,
It's just such a
it does,
hard.
but
It
you're
is hard,
making me
yeah.
scared now, right? Like
Yeah, you should be scared.
this ambient listening thing, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if there's an engagement going on, like
Yeah.
how do you differentiate then like sarcasm and
Yeah.
just like
Right.
facial expressions? Like
Oh,
there's a
there's
lot
a-
of communication
That's
that goes
right.
on.
Well, that's why you go slow with the adoption.
Yeah.
You recognize, like for example, templates. Like what every doctor has a different approach to putting the data into the EHR,
Right.
into the notes. I want it in my template. I want my language being used. I want my my inflection. I want to understand the sarcasm from the actual diagnosis. Right? Yeah, those are all tunings that have to happen throughout that process as you get it right.
You mean
So how do we-
sarcasm, John? Who has sarcasm in doctor conversations? Come on.
Sarcasm is human. You're not going to see sarcastic robots anytime soon. Thank
I
God.
mean, who knows what they're asking?
Right.
Who knows what they're at? It's Soylent Green, John. It's people.
Exactly. So how do we tie all this together, right?
Yeah.
Like we have all of these different security things we've talked
Yeah.
about, AI and everything else. This all needs to end up in your overall enterprise risk framework and process. How do we pull it together? What are the risks, and what happens if we fail to do that?
Yeah, the biggest, and again, this is pan industry, right? So, but healthcare in particular, because that's what that's what Censinet and I focus on. It has to be transformative. We can't approach the risk process landscape with the same assumptions that we did a decade ago, right? So a decade ago or longer, systems changed 3-4 times a year max. So this point in time risk process was necessary and sufficient. Today, a SOC 2, by the time it's published, it's out of date, right? Because it's a process of 140 controls and right, and you've got to have evidence and as you're doing that, again, your system is changing. And so by the time it gets published, what you looked at and what the controls you looked at may have been affected based on the change. The scope of risk changes, right? And so we've looked at risk, we've had the luxury of looking at risk a decade ago in that point in time frame. We could do a high trust audit. We could do a NIST CSF audit one time. We could do, and we could, every couple of years, we could reassess somebody, right? Because the state of change and the rate of change was manageable. Now that all bets are off, right? So you still need those certificates. You still need those processes and audits, right? But that becomes evidence into your overall program and posture, necessary, but not sufficient. And so what we try to stress to individuals that are on this journey, on this path is, you really have to look at this through a transformative lens. You have to take not just the technology, and if you just are looking for a tool to solve all your ills, you're never going to get there, especially in risk management. Risk is hard. It's difficult. It's complex, right? It's people, as I said. But
Yes.
so then you have to think about it holistically across that trinity of tech, people, process, technology, right? You have to harmonize those three things as you're adopting new technology and new approaches. If you're just taking our tool, for example, and I tell my customers all the time, if you're taking my tool to solve a problem and you have certain outcomes that you're assuming, and you're not looking at your people and you're not looking at your processes, you're not going to get the outcomes you desire. Because
Right.
this is transformative. We're changing the way you think about risk. In the past, one and done. Now we're looking at it across the life cycle, from cradle to grave and every point in between. And I adopt a product out of the box. I know what the risk profile is, but then I bring it in and I configure it and I integrate it, changes the scope and the profile. And then maybe 2 years down the road, I didn't have PHI, protected health info, or PCI involved in that application. And then the usage changed and now it's in there. My risk profile needs to be updated. I need a business associate agreement now with that vendor because they've added PHI, protected health information in there, which is a specific class regulated under HIPAA, right? So there's so many opportunities for this to change,
Right.
which means the way we approach risk has to change as well.
Asking maybe a tangential question here, because it makes me, and I know this is a topic that comes up from time to time in terms of, let's say, a cyber security or risk scorecard, right? So when you, it would be a rating, right, that you would have, kind of like food. It always thought, I lived in New York, sidebar, for like 15 years, and when Chick-fil-A came, they had a C rating on the restaurant, which is not good, but nobody cared. That line for chicken was around the block, but you know what I mean? It's an interesting way to kind of gauge. I'm willing to roll the dice for Chick-fil-A, maybe not so much for this other vendor, but is that where we're going, we need to go, or what's even the viability of some kind of system like that? And I'd just be interested in your perspective.
Sure. Yeah. So there are approaches, there are technologies, there are vendors out there that provide, let's call it a credit score for risk.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Right? So I get this credit score, 800. What does it tell me really?
Right.
It tells me at the point of time, I scored an 800, right? But just like credit scores, they change all the time.
Yes.
Right? So this notion of life cycle continuous monitoring is really important. Also, they're looking at those types of security scanning scorecard applications, right? They're looking at the organizational risk profile from the outside in. What can I see on the dark web? What can I see from the systems that they're representing to the outside world, right? And then I create some type of risk profile and score, and that gives me one dimension of risk. But I'm not taking the organization and putting it into my health system and using it. I'm taking their product or products. So I really need to understand the product risk.
Yes.
And so that's a different type of risk that
Right.
requires a different approach to risk management.
Right.
You need both,
Right. Right.
Necessary, but what's sufficient to
Yeah.
get a real understanding of that risk over time.
Yeah, it would be a tricky one. I mean, given the landscape and scope of risk,
Yeah,
and it's different for everyone, and your appetite for risk is different, and it'd be difficult to have like a universal system. But I just think it's an interesting thing.
It's
ahead.
very complex,
Yeah.
and people have, looked for the equivalent of a UL rating, right?
right.
Which, okay, great. I would love to have a UL rating, but it's a plug with well understood standards
Right.
that don't change.
Right.
Like,
right. Yeah.
Could you imagine having a UL rating and all of a sudden you got AI coming in? All bets are off on your
No,
UL
exactly.
rating.
It sounds preposterous.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's. I think it. I don't think it's possible, quite
Yeah.
frankly. And I've been spending a lot of time thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's certain things that you can certify
Right.
as indicators, but I don't think you're going to get a real true risk profile because things change so
Exactly.
dramatically. I mean, every 2 weeks we have this flywheel where we work with our customers. They help us identify opportunities to consolidate on the platform, and every 2 weeks we push out features. They might be fixes to existing
Sure.
features, but mostly they're new things that we hadn't thought about initially. But now we have this customer interaction, and they're feeding us. And so this every 2 weeks they're getting new things, right? Can you imagine trying to manage risk for that? Like, it's hard,
No.
right?
Yes.
And so if I do a SOC 2, and we're in the middle of doing a SOC 2, so I mean we have to do it because we'll do it. It's a good thing to do. It's good hygiene. But like I said, by the time that thing is published, we've already gone through probably another 10, 15 releases on the product. So I think those things are good to do. It also shows the discipline in the organization and the organization's ability to do those things, which is again is a good indicator of what their security profile looks like. But don't be fooled by simple numbers. And I remember when I first started this journey, one of the customers I was working with says, "Oh, we just ran your risk. We did a security scan on your company, and you came back and you got an A. You're great. You check." I'm like, "What?" And I'm like, "What? Can I see that?" And I read it and I went through the document. I'm looking at it like, and now we, of course, because we're a risk company, I knew what my risk was, and it wasn't good because I was a new company. And we were just building on our risk program and our security program. And we represented that to customers. I didn't want to give them a false, like, hey, look,
Right.
we're an F here, but we're going to fix it.
Right. Right.
So, but we're going to give you that transparency always, so you know what you're getting. Because if I lie to you, it's not going to help anybody
No.
in the long run. And I found early in my career, if you're honest with customers and you tell them, some of them will say, you know what, we'll come back to us, but most of them will say, wow, thank you. We'll work with you. We'll make sure we'll hold you accountable to what you're telling
Right.
us, but we'll work with you. And I just laugh at that rating because it's like we're not an A. Like I know I'm not an A. It's so, but and that's why I started thinking about this
Yeah.
whole question about certificates and audits and how realistically are these, how effective are these longer term. So
How does this stuff fit into with your the generally accepted principles for cybersecurity? Is there a connection here on trying to fill in the expectations here of cybersecurity?
yeah, that's a great question. So I write articles for the Forbes Tech Council, and I'm always thinking about things that could make life better for security analysts and risk analysts and things. And first and foremost, I think risk and security should be a board level topic and a board level responsibility, actually. Just like you have a finance committee and you have an audit committee and you have a comp committee, you should have a cyber committee, and you should hire board members that have cyber experience.
Yes.
And you shouldn't delegate that down, quite frankly, to the teams to come and present, because there's always an impedance mismatch between the CISO's world and the world
Right.
of the board, right? And sometimes you get really great CISOs that figure it out and understand how to communicate, but most often there tends to be that friction and that struggle between, what are you telling me? What's MFA? Like, what am I doing? What's this?
Right.
So I think if we made it more mandatory, then we would make strides in an understanding at the board level, which would help it with investments, would help at looking at gaps, it would help at look at where benchmarking where we are from our program relative to peers. So we could say, hey, we're spending too little in this area. All of our peers are spending 4%. We're spending 1%, right? So let's have a conversation now about resources and the business risk through the lens of the business. That's why this whole point about business process and critical function mapping is so important, because boards understand those things well,
Right.
right? So as it relates to Gap C, I had a conversation with a CISO from an insurance from an insurance organization, a payer. Oh God, it's 3-4 years ago, and we were having sushi together, and we were talking about this idea, and having a framework. If I want to look at an organization that's public today, I can go to Edgar, I can go to their investor portal, and I can pull down their 10Q, their 10Ks, I can pull down their 8Ks, I can pull down all of these different forms and filings to make a decision about the organization's financial posture or risk, right? When I do an S1 for a public offering, there's a huge risk section, right? And usually cybersecurity's in there as a line item. But there's all these other risks, right?
Right.
That help me really understand whether or not this is a good investment long term or not, right? Wouldn't it be nice if we had a standard way to communicate risk and a standard way to
Yes.
drive the accounting, if you will, of risk and cybersecurity across all industries? That's what Gap C is about.
It's interesting.
I like where you're going with this, and how do you then like how do you pull in like the outputs of like a SOC audit and everything else to get it to the level that needs to be disclosed, right? Because right now, like to your point, like you look at the filings and you don't get that data. Companies don't necessarily want to give out their SOC 2 reports other than, hey, look, we passed,
Right.
right? Like what do you envision that output being? Like what level of detail?
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I think that's the journey, right? We'd have to get together, we'd have to run it through a process to get to a level of understanding and reliability and predictability, right? And repeatability across the industry. And that takes time. So it doesn't really matter what I think. It matters like what's possible. And but the areas that I identified in the article, they're all the standard areas that we talk about: identity and access management, threat detection, incident response and recovery. And I think there's a way to again represent some level of detail that gives you an idea of where that organization is, and understanding the processes, procedures, protocols, people, right, that are involved in the back, in the in the back office, if you will, doing the jobs, right? So you could have a credit like score for all those different categories, and that would be an indicator of, wow, everything is 600 where it should be 750 or 800. Now, we understand the detail behind that. It's just not an arbitrary number. So all of that has to be published, the algorithms, the approach to getting the score, what the score means, right? All of that has to be transparent. And with that transparency, then we have understanding, and then we get repeatability. And then you get gap and you get non-gap, right? So even in finance and treatments of finance and auditing and how you reconcile revenue and how you treat expenses, right? You have a gap number and then you have a non-gap number. You could have a non-gap cybersecurity view of the world too, right? So, but I think, Gap C took time to get to, or I'm sorry, Gap took time to get to where it is today. It wasn't just out of the box. We learned a lot. We made some changes, right? It was a journey, but it was backed by a process and a set of procedures and a third-party approach, if you will, that managed the overall framework and the requirements to support it, which is why you get non-gap, because people are like, well, we want to treat it differently. Okay, great, you can treat it differently, but you have to report it as non-gap accounting, right? And I think that's a good way to think about it, because then you get the best of both worlds. But there's a lot of upfront work, and I'm sure, you get two Cecils in a room, you're gonna have agreements, you're gonna have disagreements, you're gonna have arguments about things that are important, not important, etc. Which is why I love this space so much. It's so rapidly evolving, changing. There's so much opportunity to make a difference today. And wouldn't it be great in 5 years if we had a Gap C that we could report on it and every public company reported on it?
I
That
love
would
the
be
idea.
pretty amazing. And then you did your regular updates on it too, just like you do with your quarterly reports. You have your financial section, you have your Gap C section. I could look at the cybersecurity reports. So anyway, that's the vision.
I love it. And
Yeah.
you kind of thinking all these changes too, when you talk about evolving, kind of coming back to leadership, it's always an interesting conversation when it's not if, it's when, right? And accountable leadership, and now we're seeing boards of directors having fiduciary responsibility if something happens. I mean, as you look kind of ahead at, kind of leadership roles evolving and certain skill sets being required, and, how do we need to be thinking about these leaders, and particularly those who can, drive in this world of so many unknowns, but where security is just so critical, and so many, kind of cracks in the system. It'd be very difficult to navigate, I think, as a business leader or a board of directors. I mean, what are your thoughts on that ahead in terms of that evolving?
Yeah. Wow. Was that one question or like five?
I think it was like 5. Yeah.
Trying to unpack it. Yeah. Someone recently on this topic of transformation, someone recently said, transformation requires leadership,
Yes.
right? And so, and leadership is hard, right? There's books and consultants, and you got McKinsey and all these different consultants that are always thinking about leadership and always writing about leadership, and so, the first step is to acknowledge the problem, right? So you can't recover unless you acknowledge there's an issue.
Right.
And so the first thing is, and it's like anything, there's so many things that boards and directors have to manage today.
Yeah.
The last thing they want to do is take on more.
Right.
So there's this natural friction between doing the right thing long term for the business and industry, and then doing what we can do based on those things that are in front of us.
Right.
So it does take this forward-looking approach and leadership to really drive change. And I just think things would be more transparent. We might actually start to level off the trend line of breaches and ransomware events and other events over time if we collectively collaborated in a way that we could truly be stronger together. But that takes leadership, right? And so
Yes,
no
yes.
individual is going to say, "Oh, pick me," right? So the government has a role there. So the government through regulation can drive that change, which is good. We're in a, we've just changed administrations, right? And this administration is anti-regulation. So there was a change underfoot to modernize the HIPAA rule to include a lot of these things that we've been working on collectively through the private and public partnerships of HHS and CISA and others. And I've been part of that with other leaders at different health systems. And we were getting close to making a pretty significant change. And then the administration changed, and, we're sort of delayed, right? So we're on hold, which, again, just to change even a regulation like HIPAA is like moving a mountain.
It really is.
Right? And it exists, right? So imagine trying to take that same level of accountability and drive change at the board level or at the senior leadership or executive level. Really hard to do. And no one, I used to say this early on when I first got into cybersecurity. One of the learnings is nobody wants to be the most secure. It's unfortunate, but nobody really, they're going to do enough to check the box.
Yeah. Right.
And to do what they need to do to get by, because it's human nature, right? It's like
right.
there's some of us that are dreamers, and some of us, but then there's everybody else, right?
Right.
Everyone else is gonna know. I got so many other things I got to do. Let me just get through this,
Exactly. Yeah.
and so that notion of checking the box is so critical, because you could have a great idea, but the market says, yeah, that's a great idea, but I don't need that to solve this problem. I just need to check the box, right?
Right.
So, I mean, wouldn't it be a great idea if we put security controls around data, right? That would be great, right? I did that, back in 2002, 2004, and then the Sarbanes-Oxley and the California CASB law came out around data protection back in, I think it was 2022 or 2023, July of that year. And I thought, oh, wow, this could be great driver for my business. And then it's like, yeah, checkbox is full disk encryption. That's how we're going to solve it. It doesn't really solve it,
Right.
but it checks the box, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So these things aren't always aligned, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that the problem is big enough, though, and I think that people are trying to solve the problem, to their advantage through their lens, right? The UL label is one good example of that, right? There's a whole, people believe that they can just, create a certificate or a UL rating or something that's going to solve. Sorry, folks, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
It's risk is too porous. It's not as binary. It's going to change. So that'll be a checkbox, and you won't solve the problem.
Right.
And so if you look at the data is still up and to the right with breaches and attacks and everything else. And now with AI, and I've been saying this, I'll say it again, it's been eerily quiet on the Western Front, if you will, of data breaches and attacks. Now, we're seeing some interesting things. We just saw the NPM, the packaging vulnerability that just hit. And so, we're going to see things like that at the supply chain level.
Right.
But I think, this is what I posit, I think the bad folks that have been organizing over the last 5 years or so, that's been the big change there. Hackers were independent.
Right.
Some were kids. Some were, a little more nefarious. In the last 5 years, they've organized.
Yes.
They become organized criminals. They become
Yes.
mafioso, if you will, electronically. That changed the paradigm. That changed the attack surface. That changed the way that they hit folks. They became microservices, if you will.
Right.
I'll create the worm. I'll go collect the money, the Bitcoin. I'll do this. I'll do that. versus one person doing all things. So
Right.
now you get scale. Okay. The other thing that's changed is AI. So to the point, quiet, what's going on, there's going to be something big, I think, because it's been too quiet and the level of change technologically is such that you would expect more attacks right now. You're not seeing it. So that says there might be some organization going on here, and they're getting ready, and at some point it's going to be bigger than we've ever seen. So we'll see. Hopefully I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But
Do you have a theory on what that risk is? Like I'm concerned about embedded things in some of these AI models being trained where we can't see it and
Yep.
you don't
Exactly.
know.
Yeah,
What are the things that are keeping you up at night?
I think the risks that hit so like a Change Healthcare hit 80% of the health industry, and it was interesting because there's this software bill of materials concept where I've got software and I have a bunch of supporting elements, libraries and such that come from third parties, and that's risky. And we've seen events happen at that level. Log4j is an example of that, right? And that affects many. That's a one-to-many effect. That's a nice blast surface for the bad guys. Then you've got the vendor bill of materials, which is a concept that me and another guy at dinner created, where it's like a software bill of materials, but it's about the vendor and the vendor's concentration of products and technologies. And so the example of Change is, oh wow, we just saw that Change got hit with, and we don't use that product, so we're good. And then 2 days later, oh damn, we do use that product. They acquired it. We didn't know that. It's part of Change. We're in trouble. And then like a day later, and this is the big aha, we only have so much money on the balance sheet. We only have so much working capital. We only have so much money to keep operations going for a couple of weeks, not months, right? So, you talk about that safety, money that you have as an individual. You want a couple months of money in case something bad happens. Like many of these health systems have had weeks of
Yeah.
capital to operate. And that becomes a big wake-up call. So that blast hit a lot of people quickly. Now we reconciled it, recovered fast, which was good. But, I don't know. I mean, I think about the infrastructure. I think about all of the different infrastructures. There's like, I think 16 of them. Like, you got the water supply, you have the energy infrastructure. Those are the things I worry about. And if it hits it in a way that, I mean, healthcare's bad. If a hospital gets hit, that's bad.
Yeah.
If it can recover quickly, great. But if it can't recover quickly, or worse, you're in the ambulance on the way to the hospital and they shut down, and now you're diverted, you're having a heart attack, and your diversion is like 70 miles, 80 miles out. You're not. It's not good, right?
Right.
And those things have happened. We that's part of the survey that we ran. We saw that diversion was affected, care was affected, labs were affected, right? So but it's that one hospital. If it's from a ransomware perspective, if it's a multi-hospital attack and shuts down multiple hospitals, that's bad, right? So those are the things I worry about, and I know that they got to be organizing, right? They got to be doing something. And it's just, I mean, have you noticed how quiet? I mean, things
Yes.
happening, but it's been pretty quiet, hasn't it? Given the technology that's out there and available now.
Eerily quiet. I
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So not to scare anybody, so
we're already scared.
I think the
shouldn't
costume
say
this year for Halloween will be the AI robot. I think that'll be the scary thing. Oh no, it's AI. Give it the candy and get out of here. Sorry.
No, it's so true.
Yeah,
So
it
true.
won't be the politician mask. It'll be this. Oh no, it's a robot. No, get out of here, AI. Yeah.
Oh,
Here's a Reese's peanut butter cup.
yum. That
Sorry.
sounds delicious.
Yeah, I
No,
know.
it's
That was
Friday.
always my favorite. So those are the houses you want to go to, or the houses that gave you the full big bar, like the big Snickers bar, not the
yes.
little mini. Oh, those are the greatest
Yeah.
ones. Yeah.
The houses with fruit. No thanks.
Oh my gosh,
Sorry.
Awful. Yeah. Or the toothbrush. They would try to be sarcastic.
Exactly.
Toothbrush.
Oh, Ed, thank you so much for joining us today.
pleasure.
I
Yeah,
love this
yeah.
conversation. This has been a lot of fun, but also incredibly insightful because, I mean, these are really, really critical themes that, need to be discussed, explored, and particularly around healthcare, I think, as we talked about earlier. And I'm just so glad that, we're able to have folks like you, on the podcast to be able to drive these conversations and get people thinking and also aware of what's out there and available and charting a path forward. So thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Ed.
And John, you know what I'm going to say next. To all of our listeners out there, be sure you
smash that subscribe button.
Subscribe.
Exactly, subscribe.
Smash it.
And you get a fresh episode every single Tuesday. So until next time, everybody, stay secure.